making an all butter pie crust. In this pie crust recipe, I am going to be using 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 8 tablespoons of butter, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and water as needed until my dough is hydrated and comes together. So when you're making your pie crust, everything that you need to make it is going to be right at your arm's reach, okay? Here I have my bowl, I have my pastry blender, and a pastry blender is just this. It's a U-shaped, sharp-ended object that uses to cut the fat into the dry ingredients, which in this case is flour. I have my knife and I have my rolling pin. So if I was making pie crust all day, everything right here would be at my disposal. So I'm going to start by cutting my butter. So I want to cut my butter first in half because you want to use small cubes, okay? Then each half gets cut in half again. And then cut into small cubes. If you were doing this in advance, you would go ahead and have all this butter cut, and it would be waiting for you in the refrigerator until you were ready to use it. You don't want your butter to come up to room temperature at all when you are making a pie crust, okay? You want it to be cold as possible. Once your butter has been all cut up into the small cube shapes, because remember, I don't want large pieces in here. I want like a small cube like this. Then you're gonna put your knife away and you're ready to begin. We're gonna add our 1.5 cups of flour into our mixing bowl. I'm gonna also take all of my butter and I'm going to toss it into my flour. Then I'm gonna just toss it around, coating each piece of flour, each piece of butter with a little bit of flour, okay? I'm gonna add in my salt. If you don't buy salted butter and you buy, like I buy unsalted butter because we always bake with unsalted butter because that allows us to control the amount of salt in a recipe. But if you don't have unsalted butter and you only have salted butter, you feel free to go ahead and use salted butter, but eliminate the salt from your recipe. Using your pastry blender, you're going to just cut the butter into the flour. Okay, just like this. If you do not have a pastry blender, you may use your hands, or you can use a knife and a fork. But remember, if you have hot hands, and that means naturally your hands are warm, keep everything in the refrigerator. Put your bowl in the refrigerator, your flour in the refrigerator, everything so it's cold, because you don't want your hands to melt the butter as you continue to work it, okay? So you'll just keep working it in here until it is a fine texture. If we are making a mealy pie crust, how far should I blend my butter into my flour? Does anybody remember from Friday? We covered mealy and flaky pie dough. Okay, think of the term. If we are making a mealy pie crust, we want our flour mixture to look like cornmeal. And with the magic of TV, we have one already down to mealy, okay? It's like a coarse cornmeal texture. There are no large chunks of butter in it.
There's butter in there?
Yes.
Oh, so that's that, but basically just done already?
Correct.
Okay.
So you start out like this. You see the large chunks of butter. You break it down until it looks like this, and it's a mealier dough. If I want my dough to be flaky and have lots of layers, I'm going to leave chunks of butter in the dough, like you can see here, okay? This will be a flaky pie crust, which I'll more than likely use as a top crust. This mealy dough here, I'm going to use as my bottom crust. So from here, I'm going to add about a quarter cup of water into my pie dough. This is my dough so far, and I'm gonna add it in a tablespoon at a time. So I'll put like 3 tablespoons in there so far. I can use my hands, or you can use something to stir it in if you want to, but you want to control how you make it. So I typically just use my hands. Once your dough starts to come together, you're really going to be able to see what it looks like from there. But you want to control how much water you add. If you add too much water, your dough will be sticky, and that's not what you're looking for. You want to just add enough for it to come together. Once it starts coming together like this, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna set this to the side and add a little bit more water and to bring it together. Okay. Right, then I'll add the other back together, and I'm bringing my pie dough together. As you can see, I think you can see, everything has come together. It's forming. I have no loose dry bits, and I'm just gonna start forming it into a disc, okay? Once I've formed my disc of dough, I'm going to wrap it in plastic wrap. I'm going to wrap it in plastic wrap and put it into the refrigerator in order to set for at least 30 minutes, a maximum of 2 days, okay? If you're going to keep your dough longer than 2 days, I suggest you go ahead and put it into the freezer, okay? And you know your pie dough is fully hydrated because once you touch it, you're not lifting up any loose bits of flour or anything like that from your dough, okay? This is how you make a dough from scratch.